Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, Alhamdulillah, wa salatu wa salamu ala Rasulullah. We'll continue reading from Imam Al-Ghazali's Jawahir al-Qur'an wa Durar, the jewels of the Quran and its pairs. This is the second section. We are still reading from Surah Al-Baqarah. We have reached verse 218. أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. إن الذين آمنوا والذين هاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله أولئك يرجون رحمة الله والله غفور رحيم. Surely those who have believed, emigrated, and struggled in the way of Allah, the way of God, they can hope for Allah's mercy, and Allah is all forgiving, most merciful. Let us remember that we did touch upon the months, the 4 months, Al-Ashhur al-Hurum, in the previous reading, and those who choose disbelief, the context includes mentioning of the previous verses. We have read several of them, driving the Muslims out. First of all, one can bring to the picture the fact that some of the early Muslims, all of them were persecuted. Some of them were killed. Those slaves who became Muslims, they were killed. And the Prophet ﷺ witnessed even in one incident, and he could do nothing to save his own followers. The powerful Quraysh boycotted with other tribes. They boycotted the Muslims for 3 years, at least in the valley of the Sha'b of Abu Talib. They literally prevented any trade, any social relationship with them, no marriage, but no food. That's even the most important thing. To the degree that one of the companions ate a piece of dry skin. He whether he soaked it first, whether he said تبلغ بها, he simply sifted, grinded the dry skin, and he swallowed that with water. That's how hungry they were. And there were 2 waves of immigration to Abyssinia, Ethiopia today, because of the persecution. And the Prophet ﷺ ultimately immigrated to Medina, a few hundred kilometers, a few hundred miles to the north of Mecca. So the migration was really leaving Mecca. They were driven out of Mecca. وإخراج أهله, basically from Al-Masjid al-Haram, from the Haram, from Mecca. أكبر عند الله, it's greater than the fighting during the month of any of the 4 months that are haram. Maybe just to contextualize also this, there were a few lines of poetry that were attributed at one point to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq when this verse was revealed, and there was an incident in which some companions did fight away from Medina to a small group of Muslims, and they did not know that it. The non-believers said it was the very first day of Shahr al-Haram, and the Muslims thought that this is the very last day of a quote unquote a normal month, really. So they asked a delegation from the idol worshippers of Quraysh. They asked the Prophet ﷺ in Medina that is it okay to fight during this month, the month Shahr al-Haram? So this verse was revealed. So there were a poem, if you will, that rather than, as I said, some attributed this to Abu Bakr as-Siddiq, but there were those who verified that it was by Abdullah ibn Jahsh. And I'm going only to read the first two verses, and I will translate immediately. He addresses in these verses the idol worshippers. تعدون قتلا في الحرام عظيمة وأعظم منه لو يرى الرشد راشد صدودكم عما يقول محمد وكفر به والله وراء وشاهد وإخراجكم من مسجد الله أهله لئلا يرى لله في البيت ساجد. So the first three verses, he brings to the attention the idol worshippers that they are worried about fighting in the Shahr al-Haram, fil Haram itself, but in Shahr al-Haram. But the greater thing is that they rejected the revelation. They have rejected the message that Prophet Muhammad ﷺ brought, that they disbelieved. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is witness to all this. And the fact that they have driven the people from the mosque so that there will be no, that people will not witness anyone worshipping Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Fil Bayt, literally, it's in the house surrounding the Kaaba, in the Al-Masjid al-Haram, the noble sanctuary in Mecca. This is because if you go back to the previous verse 217, it does mention وَلَا يَزَالُونَ يُقَاتِلُونَكُمْ حَتَّى يَرُدُّوكُمْ عَنْ دِينِكُمْ إِنِ اسْتَطَاعُوا. They will not stop fighting you until they turn you away from your faith, if they can. That's part of the verse. It became clear that Muslims at one point established themselves in Medina. The second wave of immigrants to Abyssinia, some of them went direct rather than returning to Mecca. Now they went to Medina. Now, how about, do you continue to immigrate after things were stable and almost like a de facto state was established in Medina on this spot? And I think there is something great about this. How about immigration? And it's really it does not convey the same message when we use the word immigration in English. It's the hijrah, and why I'm using the Arabic word, because there are several traditions that address the notion of hijrah, and how at one point you would stop immigrating because there was no reason. You are not persecuted anymore. You are safe. practically wherever you are in the in Mecca, in Medina, in the vicinity, and at one point, of course, in the Arabian Peninsula, and later on, it was beyond the north of the Arabian Peninsula, and then east and west. That would be during the time of Abu Bakr and Umar. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala be pleased with them. So, using the word hijrah, the etymology of the word hijrah, or the word itself, for example, إنما الأعمال بالنيات فمن كانت هجرته, and this is the word now, إلى الله ورسوله فهجرته الله ورسوله ومن كانت هجرته إلى الدنيا يصيبها وامرأة ينكحها فهجرته إلى ما هاجر إليه. There are a couple of versions of the same hadith. Actions are considered, evaluated according to intentions. So whoever migrated, and there were, of course, she, because there were women who also migrated from Mecca to Medina or from elsewhere. If your migration was for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, addressing the male companions here, then it is so. But if you have migrated because of worldly affairs, because of because one is following a woman to marry her, and there was one case as such, then it is not considered for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Now, if you so there's the migration or immigration, you talk about moving from point A to point B, but then it changed. It changed because if you talk about the spiritual hijrah, this like spiritual migration from one state to another. A hadith narrated by Abdullah bin Amr that the Prophet ﷺ said, Al-Muslim man salim al-Muslimuna min lisanihi wa yadihi. A Muslim is, because here talk about someone who is a Muslim in a state of submission originally, the Muslims will be safe from his tongue and from his hand. So no injuries, no spiritual, psychological injuries, and no physical injuries. والمهاجر, now the immigrant, typically when we say an immigrant, we talk about somebody who moved from one geographical place to another, but here it says والمهاجر من هاجر ما نهى الله عنه. And this is something new. Of course, at the time, the immigrant is someone who abandoned hajra, migrated, but really the issue here is abandoning that which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prohibited. So you talk about life, then you don't really take away life. You talk about property, you don't take away, don't steal, really. You don't kill, you don't steal. Anything that is prohibited, then it should be abandoned. Let's say that you are scrolling on your phone and out of a sudden an image, a video, a clip, something pops up on the screen, and you know that it is not proper. Do you watch? Do you abandon this because you shouldn't? That's one thing. Do you abandon a business transaction that you know that it is not halal? You don't want to put lawful bread on the table. An example would be expired food items, or it could be near expiration, the date is very, very near, and you might not say this to the customers. Uh, so no, if you the hijrah here is to abandon such transactions because you know that you might be harming people. There's a direct hadith of that was narrated by Ibn Abbas radiallahu anhuma, where the Prophet ﷺ said, "La hijrata ba'd al-fath." After conquering Mecca, and it's called Fath. There's, you might say in English, opening Mecca, but that's exactly the language of the Islamic narrative. That's how it is described. There's no migration, no immigration after conquering, meaning after the conquer, meaning the conquering Mecca, obviously. And no immigration after conquering Mecca. Rather جهاد ونية ولكن جهاد ونية وإذا استنفرتم فانفروا. The no, you don't leave your geographical location. It's not that one is absolutely prohibited from moving from one place to the other, because Muslims did move, and in fact every land, every city that was conquered, say with literally any new city that was conquered, the Muslims were a minority at the very beginning. They would be a minority for quite some time. And this shows that they never forced the inhabitants to become Muslims. So it was a very gradual thing over a long time. It could be centuries before Muslims became the majority. And the jihad itself here, ولكن جهاد ونية, we have spoken about this more than once. Essentially, jihad is about exerting effort. Some said بذل المجهود لتحقيق المقصود. You exert basically your effort to fulfill an aim, the desired aim. But if you're asked to join the Muslims in defense of the homeland, as we say, then you should join the others. وَإِذَا اسْتُنْفِرْتُمْ فَانْفِرُوا. This jihad could also be against the النفس الأمارة بالسوء, against Satan's temptation, against one's whims, against one's hawa, personal desires that are not aligned with the Islamic worldview that is based on the Qur'an and the Sunnah. Struggling against, I mentioned, for example, struggling against that which is haram. It's as simple as that. In social relations, there might be an opportunity to get married, but one might be tempted to get married without fulfilling the conditions that would make the marriage lawful. One should remember, if it's really if one's trying to have lawful income, if one could remember that every flesh كل لحم نبت من الحرام, that grew from unlawful sources, فالنار أولى به, then hellfire is entitled for that flesh. And that means that there's possibility of ending up in hellfire because of that. So these traditions speak about two types of hijrah, because the verse itself 218 الذين آمنوا والذين هاجروا وجاهدوا في سبيل الله. If it says في سبيل الله, Iman is definitely something that is it has to be for this, pure for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. It cannot be for anything else. So this is not lip service. It's the affair of the heart. Those who migrated originally, physically performing the hijrah from Mecca to Medina. There were also those who went to Abyssinia also. And those who exert their effort, they ultimately defend the Muslims. And I say defend because let's remember really that war was imposed on the Muslims in Medina. Badr, the first battle, took place on the outskirts, a little bit on the way to Medina. Uhud itself. So Muslims, despite the Muslims were outnumbered almost 1-3. They won. Uhud. The Prophet ﷺ, Mount Uhud, the Battle of Uhud. The Prophet ﷺ had a plan. There were archers whom the Prophet ﷺ positioned them on a hilly area overseeing the battleground, and the Prophet ﷺ told them not to leave their position until he tells them to do so. But when they thought that the battle ended, at the beginning the Muslims were winning, but Khalid ibn al-Walid radiallahu anh, the Muslim military general, who at the time was still a non-Muslim, he saw an opportunity when the archers left their position. He went from behind that hill, from behind the mountain, and he surprised the Muslims, and he changed the course of the war. But literally, Mount Uhud is in Medina itself. You can see it on the way to the airport or from the airport. The Battle of the Trench was in Medina, Ghazwat al-Khandaq. The Muslims dug a trench on three sides of Medina. The Meccans were not leaving the Muslims alone, and they were launching a zero. I mean, from the Meccan, the idol worshippers' position, it was a zero-sum game. The Muslims had no choice but to defend themselves. And this is a very important issue in Islamic history. So what about them? About those who believe and those who migrated, and those who did strive in whatever form for the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. These can basically hope for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is most forgiving and merciful. يرجون رحمة الله. They hope for Allah's mercy. So Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all forgiving most merciful. Remember that another verse from elsewhere in the Qur'an. قل يا عبادي الذين أسرفوا على أنفسهم لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله إن الله يغفر الذنوب جميعا. So يرجون رحمة الله لا تقنطوا من رحمة الله. And that's exactly the most important thing in terms of the relationship with Satan, who would like the believers to have despair. They might commit a sin here or there, a mistake, a judgmental mistake, or even a grave sin, but not really associating anything or anyone with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Then there is still room for hope. Do not despair. Do not despair. And you could still hope for the mercy of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala forgives all sins for whomever He wills. لما يشاء. لما يشاء. Just avoid. This is not an invitation to commit sin, but if you happen, it's a moment of weakness, whatever. This is why there is room for repentance. So this verse could be seen against the background, because the non-believers will have their actions null and void, in a sense. Whoever among you renounces their own faith and dies a disbeliever, their deeds will become void in this life and in the hereafter. It is they who will be residents of the fire. They will be there forever. So 2:18 is juxtaposed against verse 2:17. Two different scenarios, two different ends. Alhamdulillah, this sheds some light on the notion of hijrah. There is merit for being a muhajir. There is merit for being an Ansari. Those indigenous people of Medina, the two tribes, Al-Aus and Al-Khazraj, who literally wanted to share everything with their Muslim brothers and sisters. They have definitely, it's a very unique moment in the history of humanity that we have such a wonderful hospitality. Maybe one day, inshallah, we can talk about this, but this is really Ansar. It reminds us what with Jesus Christ, with Sayyidina Isa al-Masih alayhi salam, Isa ibn Maryam, when he asked, Man Ansari ilallah, who will be my, who render me victorious, who will help me, the helpers, if you will. Inshallah, in the next reading, we will deal with verse 235, which speaks about Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala knowing that which is in ourselves, and it's a warning. But also we should know that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is all forgiving, patient. واعلموا أن الله يعلم ما في أنفسكم فاحذروه واعلموا أن الله غفور حليم. Until then, سبحانك وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. والسلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته.